baseball has successfully managed to combine all the elements. There's Olympic participation, there's pro leagues, major league, smaller leagues, and what have you, and they all coexist because we need, for the Olympics, it's no use having the pros who are making money and maybe have the best players. The US sends, second-rate players, whereas so everybody has got to accept the existence of the others, coexist, and make the sport really fly.
I'm Paul Olson. I'm the host of the Future of Pickleball. Our show is broadcast on Selkirk TV. This episode that we're doing today is part of our World Series of interviews that we're doing with global leaders, and in this case, a continental leader. We're going to have Frank Arico join us. Frank, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm just recovering from a slight cold, but otherwise looking forward to talking with you.
Well, I know we need to get you healthy. You've got a busy end of the week coming up, and we'll get to that. But you know what I'd like to do, and the thing that really becomes valuable, I think, to what's going on in the global pickleball world is tell me a little bit about how you got started personally, and then how you began developing and organizing the European Pickleball Federation.
Yeah. Well, I used to play socially table tennis every week. This is in 2016. And one of my colleagues said to me, would you like to come and try pickleball? Of course, like everybody else, I said, what the heck is that? Come, you'll enjoy it. I was 65, I think, at that stage. And I thought, well, start a new sport at this age. Well, I went to one session, and like everybody else, I was hooked. So that was amazing. And, the universality, the inclusiveness of the sport is just incredible at all levels. Then I have a background. I do a lot of skeet shooting in San Antonio. I've been to the World Championship several times. I was the director of the National Skeet Shooting Association for a few years. I come originally from South Africa. That's where my accent is. I was involved there in administration at various levels, right up to national association. So I've been involved in sports as a participant and as an administrator for quite a long time. And in England, looked around and there was no governing body. In fact, there were two, but they were, like many others sort of have started, they were businesses selling paddles, selling training, and they were not getting much traction and not being accepted by the players because they didn't want an association making money off them. So it took a little while, and then we had a meeting where I met Karen for the first time. And when we both got home, we spoke with each other, and we said, well, let's try and get this sorted out in England. So we approached the other two, and we had some very cordial meetings and explained that this wasn't going anywhere. You needed a member-controlled democratic association, and they cooperated with us. They closed both of theirs down, and on 13th of December 2018, together we founded Pickleball England. And since then, it's just been an amazing journey. I was very lucky in that Karen, like myself, is an incurable workaholic. She has an incredible work ethic, and both of us, we have complementary skills. So within 6 months, we had an open election for nominated directors, and it's just grown and grown and grown since then. So we are extremely proud of what we achieved. the last English Open, we had over 2,000 players, and it's incredible. Even for the European, which is our very first European, if I remember 5-6 years ago, we couldn't even get a little article into the press. Now, end of this week, we've got Sky News, we've got BBC, all keen to come and get more of this pickleball story.
That now, so as you guys, for anyone watching this, Frank is referring to Karen Mitchell, who's the head of the English Pickleball Association, and I had Karen on this show just a few weeks ago. You can see her in my list of interviews on Selkirk TV. But as you got England going, and it's been really remarkable. I've watched and seen what you guys have done. How did that segue into the idea of developing the European Federation?
Well, that came about as a result of a huge disappointment. A team, 9 of us, worked very hard for a year and a half on unification of the 3 international federations. That is a huge, huge issue for the sport from a number of reasons, for protecting us from other sports, for gaining credibility as a sport, for eventual IOC acceptance, a whole lot of these things. So we worked very hard, and there were 4 European delegates, France, Spain, Czechia, and ourselves. And we got very, very close, tantalizingly close to achieving that unification. And then, unfortunately, things unraveled and that didn't happen. So the 4 of us from Europe said, well, we can't do much about that. Let us focus on getting our own house in order. Let us set up a federation that is member controlled fully, that is completely democratic, that supports its members. And, we'll start with that as an example, and let's see how we can get that done.
And now, I've actually got kind of at the back end of my interview a question about how you see Europe and the world, everybody coming together. I'm so glad you brought up the subject. How do you work within the European Federation with the different? You've even got a couple of different organizations there that are trying to pull and push and different things. Do you have any thoughts on where you see that going?
Well, that is why it's so important to get us to a situation where we have one international federation. Because at the moment, well, there was a big announcement yesterday. I'm sure you're aware of the merger. Okay, so now there's 2. So what happens? We try and legislate, and one particular country member, we took a long time analyzing their directorship, analyzing their stockholders, analyzing what annual general meetings they've had, and so on. And of the 2, one was clearly a much more organized, democratic, member-led sports body. The other one was a business, like many others have started, because you get people want to sell paddles, they're interested in pickleball, so they put these things together to promote the sport. However, that doesn't reconcile with the requirements of a democratic member-controlled organization. So, but what happens is we say, okay, you are the member because we've done our due diligence, we've done our work. And then one of the other federation says, okay, well, we'll take you on, the opposing one. If we had one, you would be able to regulate, because then the rules and the criteria would be consistent all the way down, and we would have the support. You couldn't run away and hide behind one and hide behind the other. So it is so important for the credibility of the sport and the governance and administration that we get to one.
You are preaching to the choir. I'll tell you, one of the things that I find myself doing with all the different people that I interview, and I do interview a lot of the business interests of pickleball. That's really what my show is about. But this idea of having the sport of pickleball and the business of pickleball really need to be 2 different entities. It is the spirit and essence of the game we need to protect. And that, I think, is what ultimately will be the attraction to the IOC. So that being said, as these things go on, who are the two organizations that you're finding that are at odds as far as you're concerned that aren't contributing to the unification approach?
Okay, well, there were three. There was the IPF, I believe, IFP, which then converted to IPF, was the originator. Then there was WPF, and then recently GPF started up. So we have those three. About 6-8 months ago, there was a unification effort amongst those three. Unfortunately, for reasons that I'm not going to go into, because we're trying to make friends, we're not trying to antagonize anybody, because while there's life, there's hope that this total unification will happen. The other two decided to go ahead on their own and continue talks. So that's IPF and WPF. And last night, there was an announcement that the merger of those two is in fact going ahead.
I was not aware of that. I did not see it. Has there been a press release on that?
Yeah, it's on their websites, respective websites.
Oh, okay. It is. So, that is interesting. I know I talked to Seymour Rifkin from the WPF, maybe, it was probably maybe right after the year. And there were talks, I think there were talks at that time that then kind of broke up or fell apart. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said at that time, it wasn't an appropriate time to get on the show and talk about things because there was things in flux.
Yeah.
And so, that's great. That's great. I would.
That is good news. We now need the remaining two that are now left to get together for the good of pickleball and become one. Then we'll really see pickleball flying, because just referring back to the businesses and the pro leagues, I see three distinct groupings in pickleball. So we've got the rec play and social play. That is the foundation. That's where the joy, the fun, all happens down there. The inclusivity, you see old people, young people, male, female, all, even disabled. I saw in Madrid, I saw some challenged people playing against each other, and it still brings goosebumps to see them play, and the joy and the smile, to somebody who's in an unfortunate situation. So the grassroots is the real joy of the sport. Then you've got the pro leagues. Now, pro leagues are business, and there's nothing wrong with business. People can make money just like Major League Baseball and so on. They all coexist, and so that is, making money out of sport is not a bad word. But then you get the third pillar, which is the administrative and governance side. Now, that's important, that should be compliant with general democratic member-led principles. It cannot be controlled by a business or have bylaws that are not adequate, not comparable to all the other IOC countries. And that's where the rub comes in, because there are still some vested interests that are not too comfortable in or see a perceived threat of losing control by making it a truly democratic international federation. And in England, with the EPF, we've actually proved that naturally smaller members, younger members who haven't run nationals, who haven't run competitions, they don't gang up against you and vote against you. They look to your leadership because they're in awe of what you've achieved. So the same thing would apply to an international federation. This concern that smaller countries would outvote bigger countries, in practice, that doesn't happen.
Well, it's interesting that you mention that. I've had so many conversations with so many of the global leaders. It's caused me, I have sitting next to me, I have the bylaws from every major organization that's expressing interest in leadership or guidance. And I'm looking for what are those differences. I had the opportunity to have a woman named Chandler Carney on my show a couple of months ago, who is with the GPF, the other organization. And the fact that she was an attorney and she was the person that put their bylaws together, I thought was really an interesting conversation as to how did she construct it? What was it done? And many of the things that you're describing of compliance with IOC, understanding it. One of the things in particular, and I'll ask it as a question, I was never aware that the WADA requirements, the World Drugging, Anti-Drugging, was such a critical piece. And to the best of my knowledge, and I'm deep in the sport here in America, drugging has never been a question. It's never been an issue, but we as a sport have to address it.
Absolutely.
Just like every other sport, because that's part of the matrix that the IOC is looking at. And but I found it very interesting. But it's been really instrumental for me to actually read everybody's bylaws and see that in my mind, and understandably, I'm not an attorney, but bylaws are not the most complex law in the world. That's pretty straightforward. Generally, most of the bylaws of all of the efforts generally seem to be very similar. There are some differences. Your observation of a one country, one vote, as opposed to weighted voting. There are cases, I guess, that could be made for, there are sports in the world that have weighted voting. So, but how do we find a way to get together to figure this out? Because I agree 100% with you. We need to find a way to have our sport have unification, because we flounder if we don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're at risk of another sport taking us over. It's not easy. We've tried and tried. As I say, I think at the bottom of it is the vested interest and the retention of control. That there's this perceived fear. If we let go, we're going to be outvoted by small countries. But
I want to tell you guys about one of the best additions I've got to my game. And it's not another paddle. It's not another shirt. It's my Selkirk tour bag. Selkirk bags are designed with tremendous intent. They're to help you organize, to keep things that you need with you where you can get at them whenever you want them. The beauty of the Selkirk bags is they're designed by a company that really thinks first, last, and always about pickleball. They've created a series of bags at all kinds of price points that are tremendously well designed, and frankly, they look really good. Look at the Selkirk bags, not only for what you do courtside. I use my tour bag as my travel bag when I'm going around the country. Selkirk will help you have the best experience you can have. Enjoy it. Thanks so much. You can find all the bags on Selkirk.com's website. Now, are you thinking that it is the American interests that are fearful of being outvoted, or who would it be that would be fearful of many? Because the UN is a one country, one vote scenario that unfortunately I don't have the greatest opinion of how that's worked. But how do you? Is it America that you think is the concern of the one country, one vote issue?
I think primarily yes. But we have very good relations. I speak with Mike Neely, regularly, and we're working on it. But there is this perception, the wonderful work that USAP have done to have the bylaws, to have the referee training, to have the coaching training. Fantastic work. But they cannot be the owners in an international sport. They can no longer be the owners of the rules, the paddle certification, which brings in a lot of money. Those have to transition to the domain of an international federation to standardize it. You can't have one national federation as we had in the past, and we're very grateful for that because that's got the sport going. But that transition to an international federation in the hands of members is important. It has to happen for us to get higher recognition.
So, and I would agree on the face of that with everything that you're saying, but it's not my understanding that the USA Pickleball is trying to be the governing body of the sport. They've set up rules and then things that need to support that. How, as an example, how do you see the EPF with rules and with things like paddle controls, or another organization? How do you see that constructing itself or happening where it's democratic?
Okay, so at the moment, just a natural progression. All our tournaments here are played under USAP rules. Paddle certification, we only allow USAP paddles. So we certainly honor and respect all the work that has been done, and we don't want to go and duplicate all that because it's just reinventing the wheel. However, we do believe that within a reasonable time, those functions cannot be the domain of one country, even though they brought it up to a certain stage. So it's important at some stage to have a commitment with a timeline to transition this. But there we get the problem again. We don't have a single international federation. So if we did have one, all of the rules, I mean, you can't have the International Tennis Federation be run by the Lawn Tennis Federation in England. It's something that all the members agreed. And we've spoken about possibly having some sort of protection, a grandfather clause where for the first 2-3 years, any changes would need the approval of USAP in acknowledgement of the leadership and the experience. So nobody's taking that away. We're very grateful for what is being done. Absolutely, and we certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel. Now, to that end, 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with Mike Neely, which ended very well. It had to do with referee training materials and certifications. And again, we had the same theme. We can duplicate everything. I mean, it can be done, but we really don't want to. So there was some discussion as to whether Europe could use the materials or not, even though one of the requirements is becoming a USAP member, which all our members have done so to up to that stage. Anyway, happily, it's all been resolved. We committed to working with USAP on that score. They're happy to work with us. So that was an example where cooperation is much better than division.
And I'll tell you, Frank, a great deal of what you're saying, I agree with 100%. One of the things that I've been so active and interested in trying to get the global voices speaking, what's happening in the different countries around the world. I loved talking to Karen. I mean, who would have ever thought there'd be a 2,000 player tournament in Europe? I mean, that's monumental. One of the things that I think is critical to our sport is the unification globally, because it takes the voice of some of the crazy moneyed interests in the United States. Part of the challenge we've got in the United States is our sport's gotten so big. There's so many players. There's so much money being generated off of product sales, tournaments, events, things in that order. It's become a money hustle in large part. I frankly don't think that's bad, but it can't be the governance of the sport. So one of my pet peeves in the sport, as an example, is the PPA has its own rules for its players. A pro league can do that. I don't think it's really in the best interest of the game. And I look back at their rules change, and I don't see any significant difference that it's made. So it was sort of like, let's create a difference to create a difference. So I think that the global family, as it's formed and organized, really starts to become a much more sensible, intelligent approach to where we go, how we go. So I have an idea for you. I want to tease you with something. I just yesterday, the day before you and I are being interviewed, I was at the USA Pickleball Nationals in Mesa. I live in not too far from there. And I was walking in as Mike was walking out, and Mike has been on my show. And Mike Neely is going to be in Dubai in January for the big Pickleball Minds Conference. Javier Regalado from GPF will be there. I would love to have you think about it. I know Seymour has been talked to about attending. That could possibly be a wonderful place to get the different interests together to see if we could figure this out, because I'm very confident that this is something that we can solve the problem. but we have to address the details of the issues and get to a point where the decision makers can do it. Please think about possibly coming to Dubai to the Pickleball Mines. I think that could be an immeasurable opportunity.
I certainly will, but there needs to be a commitment from all sides.
Exactly.
I've had meetings with Mike and Mike Polisky and Robert Quicksilver, and we need everybody to put on the table, these are our red lines. This is what we're concerned about. We know we've got to get there. These are our concerns. And then we can work on trying to solve it. But if there isn't that clarity, that honesty, that openness, you can't solve the problem.
And don't you think, I guess in my mind, one of the things, I'll actually be the master of ceremonies at the Dubai conference.
Wow.
And Amitabh uses the expression, the Davos of pickleball. This is where we really have an opportunity to make a difference, to move the needle. And like all negotiations, everybody has to come into these things with common ground. I believe there is so much interest amongst people who are non-affiliated, that are totally independent. All they care about is the betterment of the game of pickleball,
Yep.
that will be so interested and watch so strongly that will put pressure on all of the parties to say,
Yep.
it's more important than we figured out, than one group's interests were served more than another, or something on that order.
Yep.
And I believe that momentum, that opportunity sits right before us. And as well as the fact that there's going to be a tremendous number of very big money investors from around the world, and they're looking from the business side. Okay, as this sport grows up, it's in everybody's best interest for the sport to grow and expand. But we need governance for the goodness of the sport. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
We've kind of gotten off what was my track. That's all right though. Guide me a little bit as to what's been the history in Europe of what the different countries are, how they came into the sport, and what kind of joy, fun things that you see there.
Well, it's interesting. In preparation for the interview, I did a survey of all of our members and asked, that very question: how did it start? And in about 90% of the responses were someone traveling to the US or to England and coming back, playing here, being introduced by a friend, and then going back and setting it up. And it's also interesting to see the various degrees of development, from Pickleball England, that's very sophisticated, to some newbies who have just started and feeling their way and needing support and knowledge share in governance, in how to set up an association, how to get a board together. So there's quite a lot. That's one of the biggest challenge. Well, there's two challenges that we really face. One is funding, because I keep preaching that you can no longer run this sport, whether at continental level or even in the case of England at national level or international level, based on volunteers. You cannot do that. We are too big. I always say there's only 27 hours in a day. You can't squeeze anymore. So one of the things that our board has been focused, and luckily the European Championships is going to help in that direction. We want to establish as quickly as possible a regular source of revenue for the federation. Then we can appoint a full-time COO or a sports administrator and become professional, because some of us have got some experience in sports administration. Others are full-time. We've got a couple of people on our board who've got full-time jobs. Often at a board meeting, sorry, I have to go. I've still got a few hours of work to do and things like that. So you just cannot, at this stage of development in the sport, administer it on a bunch of volunteers.
That is so true. And I've been around the sport in America long enough. I wasn't there at the beginning of the organization of the USA, what was originally the USAPA, before it was changed to USA Pickleball, but it was 100% volunteers. And I remember having a I can't think of his name. The president at the time, David Jordan. And David Jordan was going to be coming through Minnesota, which is where I lived, I think, for a family wedding. And our ambassador locally arranged for him to do a meet and greet. And at that time, and I think that would have been 2013 or 2014, he said that they had one part-time administrative, sort of an office person that was the only paid person in the organization. And now they've got over 2,000 volunteers. And my message that I take to the world is, look at the ambassador program that USA Pickleball has done. Those are all volunteers, but the strength and the power that those people, by their passion, has brought to the sport has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And I have another question, but before, when I look at the global scene, and I was invited to sit in on the GPF's first global meeting they had in Arizona about a week ago, and I'm always impressed when I see who the people are, regardless of what country, that are stepping up. They're significant people with real life experience and business background for organization very often. But the thing that I love so much about all of it is they're all looking for, what is the next best way for us to go in our country? And how do we find some funding to be able to help make it happen? And that really is what I think is the ultimate goal. IOC will be nice frosting on the cake, but the real goal needs to be the global federation is set up to help emerging countries expand and grow.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. You can't levy subscriptions as a European federation or as a national federation. You can't levy subscriptions on your members without providing some real value. Otherwise, they'll say, well, USAP in their model, basically the major competitions that they run, you have to be a member to participate. Now, that results in about 60,000 members out of 20, 30 million players. So somehow one has to find ways of delivering value to the rec and social players, because those, if they can contribute something, but we've got to give them something in return in terms of free coaching or, I don't know. But so now in England that people are seeing, we're delivering nationals, we're delivering big English Opens, we've got coaching, we've got pickleball leadership training courses, all being given by Pickleball England. Now they see, yes, some value, and you can now potentially, we still haven't, but you could start charging membership for some subscriptions.
It's interesting that you mentioned that specifically, because frankly, that's sort of been a criticism that I've had of USA Pickleball going back to the earliest stages. I thought they missed the mark, that they really should have been appealing to players. Our sport needs rules. It needs organization. It needs a system like every other sport in existence. Please help. Subscribe for the sake of subscribing to help grow the sport, not because it lets you into tournaments or it doesn't. And I think they've probably suffered from that. I know I had made the case to numerous board members over the years that I thought they should have a USAP tournament desk that was only for the sake of letting players and their friends and neighbors know what they're doing. And if you would, we'd really, that $20 that you give us or that $30 really helps grow the sport. And that's what I think has to happen. But the question is, do you think that the global organization should expect subscription from its member countries? Because that really is where most countries, FIFA as an example, there are all of the member countries support the global organization. Do you see that as being something that's possible, or would there be another way to do it?
No, I think it has to come all the way down, because you're not going to get investors in an amateur, body with, where they're not going to get any returns. So you have to find the funding, but it has to sort of cascade all the way down. You can't levy a big fee on a national federation if they are not really geared up to provide value. And it's all a question of providing value, just like you do in a business. You can't sell software or a product if the buyer doesn't perceive value in what he's paying for.
See, so on that order, I hadn't thought of this prior to that, but to me, that is sort of the positive reason where weighted voting can also have weighted financial responsibility, so that it is so that the larger, more dominant, established countries, they have more to give. I was in Europe this summer, and I had the opportunity to meet with Cassandra Bourgeois and saw a lot of what she was doing. As a matter of fact, I was there when she was organizing their national competition or their national selection process for teams. And I want to come back to the European championships, but it was so interesting because they're a small country. They've got a very nice start, but I think maybe she was indicating that there were about 1,000 players in Belgium. Well, they can't be expected. What could you theoretically charge Belgium to be part of this? But you have to have them. We want them in there. Well, that's where the dominant countries. I had Pran Kohli from India on my show a couple of months ago, and he was talking about the enormous numbers that they expect. I think we're 2 or 3 years from having the U.S. no longer being the largest population of pickleball players in the world. I think Asia, because of their population, is going to blow up. But so I think we need to find a way to get the strongest, most dynamic countries understanding they need to be helping to support the growth at the smaller end, because we need that for the sport, and we ultimately need it for IOC compliance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you think, as we're talking about this stuff, these are the reasons I kind of threw that Dubai thing out there as sort of a hope and a prayer. I know that we the sport will be able to find a solution to these intermediary problems, but I think we have to get together. And so I just think we've got the beginnings of a very good opportunity. And I know Amitabh Jain, that runs Pickleball Minds, would do anything he could do to find a space, find a way, to have a totally open, wonderful get together to talk about how we figure this out. And so I didn't want to get into too many commercials.
No.
You know what I do want you to tell me about? Later this week, you are kicking off the first European Team Pickleball Championships. Tell me about that.
Wow, that's such an exciting project. It's exhausting. I mean, I've survived on 3-4 hours sleep a night the last week, but the excitement is really mounting. And organizing the differentiators to a normal tournament, because we don't want it to be just another Open or another Nationals. So we've planned an opening ceremony with the appropriate music, with the 24 countries, all in uniforms that we've provided T-shirts. We got a sponsor for all the T-shirts. So each team have got their national flags, pretty much like the Olympic tennis. I don't know if you saw Nadal and Alcaraz.
Yes.
And so 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, we've got the local mayor. He's attending. He's going to be opening the games officially, and we'll have an entrance starting in alphabetical order with Austria, with their flag and their team in uniform, marching through and congregating in the main court where the streaming and everything else happens. We're going to have a brief 1 or 2 speeches. I'm not big into keeping people hanging about too long. So it'll probably be Karen as the host country, the mayor, myself, and then we'll start. And the round robin and everything is team versus team. So if you're playing 4 matches in a round robin, you can switch members, not during a game, obviously, but between one game and another. So it's just team results, and it's wonderful to see in the schedule. You see Austria, Bulgaria, Serbia, Latvia. It is just amazing. So, that's super exciting.
You're sending goosebumps up and down my arms. I so wish I could have been there for this. I think you guys are doing something that's amazing. Um, uh, uh, this team competition thing is something that I believe in very strongly. I just recently had an opportunity to talk to one of the organizers from the recent World Cup in Peru that did a team champion, and they just talked about the camaraderie, the energy of the groups.
Yeah.
I think that's such a positive thing. Now, when you do that, will there be a any kind of streaming, or will we
Yes.
be? And
It,
is that'll be on YouTube
on
possibly?
YouTube, yes. We will be
Perfect,
publishing the URL link on our website.
perfect, perfect,
Um,
perfect, perfect.
and what we've done too, I just completed the schedule yesterday, as a matter of fact. We've given on the streaming court, because there's only one, it's very expensive at this stage. There's only one court, the main court, that's being streamed. We've allocated, um, every country will have one game at least against each other. And we've tried to match, because obviously some of them, Luxembourg, as an example, I don't know, may have 100 members. It's going to be tough to show a game against Spain, for example.
Sure, yeah, that's
So we've tried to focus on perceived and guessed, it's a guesstimate, strength, so that at least those games can be competitive, if not to a high international standard. I mean, we noticed at the English nationals, everybody commented the standard change just in our local players between the couple of years before and now. Unbelievable.
it's interesting, and I'm sure you've met Rob Nunnery probably at this point from America, and he's a Selkirk guy, and he's very involved in the sport. But he and Megan Fudge are probably maybe the two most traveled professional
Yeah,
players that are in the game now. And hear him talk about the elevation of play, and he's
yeah,
no slouch of a player by any measure,
yeah,
and it is really fun to see and hear about. And I know that it was just amazing to look back. I think it was at the U.S. Open in April that there were quite a few European and Asian teams, and I mean there were people that they were on the
yeah,
podiums. There was no
yeah,
no second stage for them. They were full on.
yeah,
I had Steve Kuhn and Amitabh on my show recently talking about an investment fund that they're doing, and they were talking about the fact that they wondered what was going to happen to pickleball when the badminton players of the world really come into it, because they have such insanely good footwork and
yeah.
quickness. So all of that I think is just
That's
great, and it's
very
exciting.
exciting.
I do. I've got a closing question that I give to everybody, and I'll give you a moment to think about it. And that's what you see in the next 2 to 5 years. But I was looking back at what happened in pickleball in 2024. And in April, the U.S. Open had the first time there were 5,000 registered players in a tournament, the biggest ever. In May, the African Games, they literally had the first Olympic related demo game, the demo sport of pickleball that's ever been done. Who would have thought that could happen in Africa first? In June, the Mumbai India Open, I think, had 800 players. July was the English Open, the largest pickleball tournament that's ever been held in the world outside the United States. October was the World Cup of Peru. And now the big finish. We had the PPA Worlds and the USA Nationals combined with 6,000 players over a 2-week period. And now we're finishing up with the European Team Championships. I think our sport really has such great promise and excitement. And I know you feel that too. Where do you see us going worldwide in the next couple of years?
That's a very good question. I think, subject to getting ourselves normalized and organized from an international point of view, so that we can all focus on all of these things, on managing, on training, on sharing knowledge, and not trying to compete with each other, and not trying to outdo one federation against another one. We all want the same thing. There's a lot of good people, in all three or now two organizations, but we just have to find a way to make it into one, so that this one can really put in place all the infrastructure, not so much courts and so on, although that's that's quite a big limitation in Europe. We don't have the big open spaces and that we have in the States. In England, we've been very lucky because we have thousands of badminton courts. So we were able to just use those, and virtually we've taken over all the leisure centres. Pickleball is appreciated by some, but not by all. So as long as we can get the international situation, governance, unity sorted out, I think that there's absolutely no stopping pickleball. If we continue to be divided and fragmented, it's just going to be, a free for all. And one sport that I often point to is baseball. Baseball has successfully managed to combine all the elements. There's Olympic participation, there's pro leagues, major league, smaller leagues, and what have you, and they all coexist because we need, for the Olympics, it's no use having the pros who are making money and maybe have the best players. The US sends, second-rate players, whereas so everybody has got to accept the existence of the others, coexist, and make the sport really fly, and stop fighting each other, because there's been quite a bit of ugliness in this process.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I want to tell you, from Paul to Frank, anything that I can do to help you. I've had such a wonderful time producing this show and doing the broadcast and having the people on that I can, that it's really given me a wonderful way to kind of showcase things. You've shed some wonderful light on some things here that I think could be very positive. I think at the end of the day, what people need to realize is, as we shine the most positive light on pickleball around the world, any one of us that have been in it, we know what the attributes of the game are. There's a reason it's blown up the way that it has, because it has things, if nothing else, the 8 to 80 demographic that no other sport on earth has. And so we have this capability of doing things. I want to be part of the Frank Arico team, growing a singular, unified voice in pickleball. Frank, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a great interview. I'm excited. I'll be watching YouTube this weekend. I am so excited to see what's going to happen in the first European Team Championships. It'll be great fun. Thank you again for joining me.
We're very excited. Thank you too. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to be on the show with you.
Thank you.